we're going to look at the wrapping attributes of Flexbox. This is our finished version, and this is our starting version. Notice how in the starting version, the logo and all the 4 links are all stacked vertically. Yet in the finished version, using wrapping, we can spread them out in a horizontal fashion. Let's look at this in the dev tool so we can really shrink the screen down to a narrow viewport so we can watch what happens in the finished version. So I'm in Chrome, go View, Developer, and Developer Tools. Now when I shrink it, we're going to see 3 different viewports. This is the wide viewport for 571 and above as far as pixel width. Notice the mid viewport. The logo expands to the full width of the viewport, and the links fill up a horizontal area below that. And then we get to the most narrow, it goes to a stacked 2x2 with a very nice definition or symmetrical definition of the 2x2. All right, so let's go ahead and start in on our initial file that we're given by the textbook. It looks like that. We're going to first off take this vertical stacking of links and make it a horizontal row of links. So let's go into our text editor, Sublime Text, and we're going to open up 2 files they gave us. We're going to open up an index page.html, and notice in our upper area we have a logo and 4 links. That's defined near the top as an unordered list with the class of navbar. In each one of those things we have the logo right here, which is an image, and the 4 links are down below it, and those are all in list items. And that's going to be important when we address those with CSS custom classes. So let's go ahead and open up our main style sheet, main.css. And that was given to us by the book as well. It's in the CSS folder, and it's main.css. All right, so let's use some Flexbox properties to make this a horizontal instead of a vertical arrangement of our links, which are list items. So we're going to go into our CSS and find navbar, because that's the custom class that's applied to our list. And above the border declaration, we're going to punch in and create a new declaration, and we're going to call that display. And we're going to put that in as a flex. You can tell something's off. I've spelled this wrong. I need to spell it properly for the color coding to work. All right, it's happier now. Let's save it and look at it in our browser. And let's refresh that. Now you notice we have them in a horizontal setup, but as we have that in our finished version, those are all the way over at the right. Let's shrink our viewport down in our original. Let's see what's going on with that. Let's once again look at it in the dev tools so we can shrink it very narrow. So View, Developer, Developer Tools. So we shrink it. You see that the logo shrinks and the links squeeze it down. So what we want to do is we want to expand the logo all the way across. And we want these links to wrap under. So let's do the wrapping the links under first. So let's go back to our CSS. In that same .navbar custom class, we're going to punch in right under our display flex declaration. And we're going to go flex-wrap. And we're going to say wrap. They'll allow them to wrap under the logo, the link items. You notice as we do that, but it's kind of a haphazard wrapping. You see how it's not even. Let's now make the logo expand all the way across so they'll wrap under the logo. We're going to write a new media query to actually pull this off. Right now we have a media query in our CSS. It says min width 571 pixels. That means it's going to be a media query that affects the layout in the viewport for viewports of 571 pixels and greater. So we need to write one that works on viewports that are smaller. So let's go in here and write @media and put your parameters of size in with regular parentheses. And we're going to do max-width colon space 570 pixels px So this is going to work on media queries, or actually viewports. This media query will affect viewports that are very small up to a max width of 570. Once it gets above 570, the one for the min width of 571 will take over for the styling or layout of these specific items. So after we get the size parameters in our new media query, we're going to actually put some CSS rules in there. Let's put our brackets in, come down, and we're going to write our calls to our custom classes of .navbar and .logo. After we put those in, we're going to put another set of brackets in and write the declarations that are going to affect both of these custom classes when the viewport is 570 pixels or smaller. Let's go flex-basis. Put your colon in. 100%. That should make our logo expand to 100% of the parent container when the screen is 570 pixels or smaller. Let's go back up here. We'll pull this wider before we refresh it. Let's refresh it. Nothing changes on the wide viewport, but as we narrow it, look what happens. Our logo now becomes the full 100% of the parent container. That's what our flex-basis 100% did. Now look at our navigation links. You see this extra space that's over here? We need to get rid of that extra space. Let's look at the finished one. When the finished one gets to that medium viewport, notice they take up all of the space here. So we're going to go to the navbar LI. So we want to affect, let's look at our code. Let's go to our HTML page. We want to work on all the LIs for the links that are in the class of navbar. So we're going to actually write a new rule into this 570 or below media query. Let's go back to our CSS page. And in that new smaller media query right here of 570 with the max width, we're going to punch in under the .navbar.logo rule we just wrote. So we want to get in after this bracket, but before this closing bracket for the whole media query. So punch in after that bracket, and we're going to write a new rule that says for the LIs in the navbar, so we're going to go .navbar space LI, which means affect all the LIs in the navbar. Right, a new set of brackets for our CSS rule. We're going to write a declaration of flex-grow. Colon and 1, because 1 stands for 100% in FlexGrow. And what that's going to do, that's going to make each of these LIs grow to fill up that area. So let's go back here and save this. Let's go look at our browser, and this is the finished one. Let's go look at the one we're working on. And so now we refresh that. They've grown. They've now filled up that whole area that wraps under the 100% logo in the small viewport. When it gets bigger, it does that. So notice in our finished one, these are centered nicely. In ours, they're over on the left. So let's address that in the rule we just wrote. In the small media query for the max width 570, find the navbar LI and the FlexGrow one we just wrote. And under that, let's text align center to center our text in our little links. Text-align, space, center. Make sure you have your semicolon at the end of that declaration. Save that. Go to the browser and look at the one. See how those are all over in the left. Let's refresh it. They centered, and you should notice the logo centered as well. So as we play with this, looks good wide. It's still not over on the left. We'll get that done eventually. As we jam it up, it gets kind of weird. It kind of looks good with the 2x2 here, 2 above and 2 below, but look how that's not equal right there. Those aren't spaced out very well. We can actually clean that up a little bit. So let's go back to our CSS in our text editor. And we're still in the small media query for the little or the narrow viewport. And where it says navbar LI, let's do a flex basis of 50% to make each one of those, when they get wrapped around each other, they go to 50% of that space. So I'm going to punch in under the FlexGrow one in the navbar.l or the .navbar LI. And I'm going to flex-basis. And the value of 50%. And make sure you have a semicolon at the end of your declaration. Save that. Notice how they're kind of wonky here. If I refresh that, see how that dividing line splits it evenly between the two. I know it's minor, but it just cleans it up nicely. All right, so let's go through, and we can leave that as it is, but let's clean the code up. There's some coding conventions we can do for what we just accomplished in the navbar li. So down under that flex basis 50%, let's do some code that cleans up both of the declarations above it into one line. So we're going to go flex colon space. We're going to put a 1 in for the flex grow value. We're going to put a space and put a 0 in for flex shrink, which we didn't use, but we can define it there. And then for the flex basis 50%, we can just say 50%. And we can get rid of those 2 lines of code over it and those 2 declarations. And we folded 2 declarations into one. And this is just to clean up and write leaner code. Save that. We'll refresh it. Nothing should change. It's just a leaner way to code 2 declarations as one declaration of CSS. Now let's work on something that's going on the larger viewport. Let's look at our finished one. You notice all the links go over to the right on the larger viewport. So let's do that on ours. We're going to go into the larger viewport. Don't work in the one that's for the 570 max width. Let's go down to the one that's the min width, 571 pixels. That means when the screen's 571 pixels or larger, it's going to affect it. So let's punch in above the footer in our lower viewport. I'm going to move the screen up a little bit to work with this so it's easier to see. Scroll down. Here's our larger viewport. So like right before the footer, let's punch in there. Click back up here. And let's write a new rule that affects the nav bar and the logo. So let's custom class navbar space period for the custom class of logo space. Let's write some brackets. I'm going to give it a turn so we have room to write our declaration. And I'm going to write in here margin dash right colon auto, and this will push everything away from the logo over to the right margin. Let's save that. Refresh. It moves it over. And there's our smaller media query that folds it to the 4 with the 2x2 and the expanded logo at the top. So what we need to do is we need to do one more thing, because it looks weird going from here to 2x2 there. The 2x2 looks good that narrow, but we need an intermediate media query to where these just all line up as 4 across, like this one, the finished one. You notice we have the wide one where they're all over on the right, a medium media query where they all line up under the logo as a single horizontal row, and then our smallest media query that they go to the 2x2. So let's write that last media query so that they line up as 4 across between the small one, which is a max width 471, and our large one that's a min width that starts at 571. It's a 570 and a 571. All right, so let's go back here. And let's put the intermediate one between the 2 of these. So you see we have the max width 570 for the small, and we have the min width 571 for the large. Let's punch in right above the large media query. And let's write at media for our third media query. Now we're going to give it the sizes that it's going to affect. Regular parentheses. And so it's going to go down and start working at a min width of 415. Min dash width. Colon 415 pixels px. Now outside of that parenthesis, the closing parentheses, give it a space, and we're going to say it's going to work all the way up to 570 pixels. So we're going to go a max width, but let's put in and put a new set of parentheses in and do max dash width colon 570 px. Give it a space and let's put some brackets in. Come down and write a declaration that works on the custom class of navbar. And the list items inside that navbar. We'll put another set of brackets. And notice when they went to the 2x2, we had a flex here, a flex basis here of 50%. That means 2 items in there. This one we're going to do a flex basis of 25%, so we get 4 of them into that same area. So flex basis. Colon, space, 25%. Make sure you have a semicolon at the end. Save that. Let's refresh it. Did not work. Let's find out why. At media, min width 415 px and max width 570 px. One character will run your day. Flex basis 25. It doesn't know the value. We need to put the percent in there. Now it'll give us quarters instead of the halves of the 50. Refresh. The large media query has it over on the right side. The medium media query has it in the quarters, 25, 25, 25, 25%. And the small media query breaks it down into an even 50-50 on that wrapping area and 50% and 50% on that wrapping area. So that is the wrapping properties in Flexbox.